Hola, and a big Heidi Halloween hello to you, my lovely people, and very warm welcome back to The Library is Haunted. So I hope you brought your creepy library cards, my darlings. Where's the camera? Focus, Stuart. Welcome to the finale of this Halloween horror-themed mini-series in which I attempt to work my way through some of the subgenres of horror and just generally scary, freaky, Halloween-friendly fiction. If you've missed the last 4 videos in this 5-part series, then where have you been, Mildred? Go to my channel and check them out. But if you have been following, thank you so much. And for this final episode, I've decided to wear something suitably Halloweeny. Don't know why I hid my face there, but there we go. I have worn my lovely little Halloween Care Bears t-shirt, which is, I believe, still available from ASOS. Full disclosure, it's actually a nightie, but I just bought a smaller size so I can wear it as a t-shirt. So there we go. So this week's episode I have really affectionately called the Schlock-y Horror Picture Show. Now, and I want to make really clear as well that when I use the word schlock, I'm not meaning in the kind of dictionary sense where it's basically trash or inferior. What I mean by schlock is kind of affectionately camp and ridiculous kind of horror stuff that I really, really enjoy. I suppose in some respects, and I mean this with no disrespect, you could call things like cozy crime a kind of schlock because they're often written off as trash or poorly written or whatever, which I don't believe is true at all. But I suppose the way I'm conceptualizing it is outlandish, OTT, and as I say, unforgivably but gloriously camp. Okay, so you know what kind of things I'm talking about here, almost like B movies and stuff. So I once watched a B movie which was brilliant called Killer Flies from Mexico, which was incredibly low budget and kind of in the tradition of B movies and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of vibes we're going for, but I just want to clarify that I mean it really affectionately and with a lot of love, rather than, you know, taking the mickey out of people or saying that they write bad fiction. Because if it's published and people are buying it and reading it, then there is an audience for it, which to my mind means it's totally valid. And what do I know anyway? You know what I mean? I know just as much or as laced as anybody else. So there we go. So with all that being said, this past week I've had a really fun time with my reading. What I love about Schlock is that there's a kind of respite from any kind of serious upset and scariness because of the ridiculousness of it all. As I mentioned in the aforementioned Killer Flies from Mexico, what it really manages to do quite cleverly is there's the body horror of, for instance, in this case, insects with full sentience who are out to destroy humanity. But there's also how OTT it is. You can laugh and cringe in equal measure, which I think is quite an achievement, really. It doesn't happen that often, I don't think. It sort of balances beautifully. What makes something schlocky? I don't really know, because technically, by rights, some of the imagery in The Exorcist, for instance, should be schlocky. You know, with the pea soup scene and the walking downstairs as a spider thing. No spoilers, but that does happen. And I just sort of think, I don't know, like, that's got the dials turned more to creepy, or maybe it's a self-awareness, maybe it's a sincerity thing, I don't know, but I just want to kind of point out those differences. So this week I read, via audiobook, Paperbacks from Hell, the twisted history of 70s and 80s horror fiction, which is a kind of anthology compiled by Grady Hendrix, who is a writer famous for schlocky sounding horror fiction titles such as The Final Girl Support Group, which kind of celebrates the slasher final girl trope in horror. Also wrote My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is like a beautifully campy into the 1980s, and is stylistically similar to that. I read that a few years ago. That was actually quite creepy though, because I did have a slight panic attack on a train reading it. Don't know if the two were related, but there we go. What else has he done? The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, things like that. So you get the idea that he's kind of a connoisseur of recognising what's horrifying about horror fiction, but also how to kind of gently spoof it as well. So there's kind of, it's operating on 2 levels. you know, I think he also wrote Horror Store as well. Horror Stew, I believe it's pronounced, which is a kind of horror novel set in an IKEA-like place. So I would recommend checking out Grady Hendrix for self-aware horror, pop culture-y. So this was a kind of collection of loads of books, kind of mass market paperbacks that were published in the 70s and 80s that were so beyond, like so beyond in terms of concept and I guess explicitness in a way, what had come before, and kind of he sort of goes over how actually mass market horror saved the fortunes of a lot of publishing companies, and then gives examples of the kind of stuff they published. And it's all kind of divided into categories of, you know, I know, vampires or killer natural elements or killer insects or so on and so forth. And you know, it's almost encyclopedic. And what I love about it is that he does it all with a kind of arched eyebrow, showing you now, but without kind of sticking his nose up at it. It's really an affectionate book, and it just goes into enough detail that you can kind of pick through and go, okay, that sounds like something I might like to read. That doesn't sound like something I'd like to read. Now, a word of caution would be, it's quite explicit. Not necessarily his book, but the books that he's talking about. I mean, some of them are like, I was listening to this I was staying at a Travelodge one night for work, and I was listening to it and just going, oh, like, I definitely don't want to read that, which is really, really interesting, because actually I enjoyed this book. There weren't many in the book that I thought, you know what, I'll pick that up, which makes me think actually what I was appreciating was an appreciation of the genre rather than the individual books that make up the genre that Grady Hendrix was talking about. So that's quite interesting in and of itself. But if you're looking for a kind of catalogue of curiosities, as it were, and a kind of, they published that, but then again, they published 50 Shades of Grey, so, you know, what do I know? Then you might find this really, really interesting. What it did do was give me a bit of more of an appreciation for some of the, what I would have classed as like schlock, stuff that I read as a teenager, and stuff, well, possibly even younger as well, which is, if you recall from my intro video to this series, what I wanted to kind of pay tribute to. I've always kind of had an affection for those kind of children, young adult, teen lit books that kind of broach that little gap between mystery horror as well, so like the slasher genre, if you will, but always with a kind of safe ending. One of the ones I mentioned last time was a book I'd read called The Mall, or The Mall, depending on where you're from, which is a Richie Tankersley Cusick book, who, you know, they were a very popular author in the 90s and so on and so forth. But I used to really like the sort of Halloween or mystery editions of things like The Babysitter's Club, which I've mentioned many times, and Sweet Valley High, things like that. I like themed editions. Like, I might have read the whole series, but I like the themed ones. So one of my favourites, for instance, of The Babysitter's Club is the mystery, this kind of mystery sub-series that often had elements of horror. So Dawn and the Halloween Mystery, for instance, Claudia and the Phantom Phone Calls, but they were always more on the human side rather than the creature side, if you will. So anyway, I was going to reread The Mall, and I decided not to because I couldn't get either a Kindle version or a quick paperback version, so I ended up picking up instead Overdue, which obviously it's about books, it's horror themed, it's bang on trend, why wouldn't I? And it's set in a library. So also, I tried to listen to the audiobook, and no disrespect to the reader, but I just couldn't, so I had to read it in proper format. And this is very clearly printed by the company as well. You can kind of tell with the slightly blurriness of it all. So it's been reprinted from what it originally was. It's very similar in many ways to the old Point Horror series as well, which was a kind of, I think they were a thingy at one time, weren't they? They had like Point Mystery, Point Horror, Point Break, I don't know, I'm making that up. But this one is about a young woman called Kathleen who works in a library, and her the head librarian, who's a bit weird, goes away and leaves her in charge, and she's working with a young man called Robin, who may or may not be a selective mute. And one day she is checking books back into the library, and obviously it's the time of year for spookiness and scariness and all that business, and somebody returns 5 books about death, murder, torture with diagrams cut out of it. So she immediately is on the alert, and then strange things start to happen around the library and in her real life. Her best friends are targeted. She finds herself face to face with a handsome, mysterious stranger who may or may not have malicious intent. You know, she finds a series of weird things that have happened in the library, and she keeps receiving these notes that are basically suggesting she's next. And what I love about this is that it doesn't pretend to be anything other than it is. I mean, being when it was published, which I think was mid-90s? Yeah, 95, bang on. It's gloriously, and I say that with an arched eyebrow, heteronormative, white, cis, all that stuff. And it sort of, you know, has no interest whatsoever in breaking taboos or anything like that. But then I don't think that was the point of it. So it's a short, kind of very fast-paced series of teen horror cliches and tropes, with a kind of oh my god, will she survive to the last page kind of vibe, and a little cliffhanger on every page, which I think makes it exactly what it is supposed to be, and it's not pretending, as I say, to be anything else. So I think I read this in 2 days because I took it to bed with me. And what makes it schlock especially, like, look at the little details, like a little skeleton holding the overdue notice and stuff like that. So I kind of have a real soft spot for things like this. I didn't guess the culprit either. It could have been anyone, but then again, I wasn't really looking for the slasher culprit in the way that I don't often with murder mysteries either. I was just kind of there for the ride, and there's no shortage of suspects, and it's full of American horror teen cliches, and is all the better for it, in my opinion. So, you know, if this is the kind of stuff you really like, it's very, and I say this with love, it's, you don't have to pay close attention. You can just kind of let it wash over you like an episode of a teen drama, and it's all the better for that. So yeah, that's what I read this week mostly. What I am going to do today, because it is the big day itself, it's Halloween today when you're seeing this, I am going to listen to am I going to listen to some short things? I might. No, do you know what I'm going to listen to? And I can't remember the author, but there is an audiobook that I want to listen to today, because it's quite short, called Patricia Wants to Cuddle, which is a queer, no, it's a lesbian Sasquatch, yes, really, love story, which is very schlock, very, very schlock. As I say, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the author, but I'll put it in the description. And yeah, it's quite short, so I think I'm just going to listen to that today, and that will be my contribution to the kind of creature, horror, campy Halloween vibes that are happening today. I will probably read or finish reading what I have read, which isn't schlock per se, but is on topic for a video I'm going to do in a few weeks. Agatha Christie's contribution to Halloween fiction, which is Halloween Party. Which this lovely cover as well, but I think this has been printed by the company as well that I bought it from, rather than the actual publishers, which is a bit, don't think they made that quite clear when I bought it, but hey ho. So that's what I'm going to do. This one is about a Halloween party in the, I think it's the 70s. This is one of the older Poirots. No, it's 69, so almost 70, and features her kind of coded Agatha Christie character, Ariadne Oliver, who attends a Halloween party where a young woman claims that she once witnessed a murder and then is found drowned in the Bobbing for Apples bucket. So not quite schlock really, but some good seasonal fare. So that is what I will be reading today. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little series. As I say, I'm not really one for horror fiction at the best of times, but I've really, really enjoyed this little sojourn into the creepy season. So as of next episode, the library will no longer be haunted, my darlings, so you can breathe a bit easier with those cards. But let me know how you're celebrating, if you're celebrating Halloween. What do you get up to? Do you go trick-or-treating? Do you decorate the house? I do neither of those things, but I'm still here for any kind of seasonal celebration. But for now, put those library cards somewhere safe and dust off the cobwebs. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Much love and many evil, maniacal, Halloweeny laughs. Mwah!